What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Boland string trimmer, and the problem is I just picked it off the curb for free and I don't even know if it works. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video we try and repair this trimmer, however it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. So I found an ad on Craigslist for some free trimmers, and while some of them were only parts trimmers, this one was complete and in great condition. However, I wish it wasn't a Boland's. One of the first trimmers I ever tried to fix was a green Boland's, and I learned about what not to do when fixing it. Fortunately, this one looks to have been used very little, so I think I have a good chance of getting it working. Now, the exterior appearance of a trimmer doesn't determine if it's going to work, so we're still going to have to do some diagnostic work to figure out if it's worth fixing. Now, if we take a look around, we can see that the trimmer head has an adapter to use two pieces of heavy-duty string, so I wonder if there's something wrong with the original head. The only other problems are the fuel lines, which are almost completely gone, so I'll have to figure out how the lines are arranged and then replace the lines. The bigger problem is I'm not a big fan of this upside-down engine arrangement. Most of the trimmers I work on have the fuel tank at the bottom and the spark plug at the top. Unfortunately, it's reversed on this trimmer, which isn't a bad thing, but the fuel lines and filter are critical in making sure the fuel doesn't leak out of the tank. Now, this isn't much of an issue when the fuel tank is at the bottom of the engine. The first step I'm going to make is to check that the engine isn't worn out. To do that, I'm going to slowly pull on the rope and feel how much the engine is fighting back. And I have to say, this rope is really tough to pull over, so that means that the engine is not worn out at all. If yours is really easy to pull, then the engine might be worn out, or it may be down on power, or it may not start at all. The next step is to remove the spark plug and inspect it for any problems, and if that's good, I'll put some fuel in the spark plug hole, replace the plug, and then try starting it. After removing the plug, it's pretty clear that this plug doesn't have a bit of carbon on it, so it's brand new. The previous owner must have replaced it as part of their troubleshooting. Well, it wasn't much of a starting test, but it did try and run, so I'm confident that it will work. However, I want to try this test again, but this time I'll remove the engine cover so I can put fuel directly into the carburetor's throat. So this time I was able to get enough fuel into the engine through the carburetor, and it ran for a lot longer. The next step is to remove the carburetor and inspect it for any problems. What I'm looking for is a blockage in the internal screen and any damaged diaphragms. After removing the plate on the pumping side of the carburetor, we can finally see the round internal screen, and there is one small piece of debris, so that's an easy cleaning job. If yours is covered in debris, that would indicate that you're probably missing your fuel filter in the tank. The next thing we need to do is make sure that these two check valve flaps are flat and parallel with the rest of the diaphragm. The easiest way is to look at it from the side and see if they're laying above or below the rest of the diaphragm. This one looks fine, so I'll reuse it. If yours isn't flat, then you might want to consider buying a rebuild kit. The next step is to remove the plate that covers the metering diaphragm so we can inspect it. We need to make sure it's not beginning to harden or get wrinkles in it. Unfortunately, it seems to be stiff and isn't going to move like it's supposed to. That means we need to remove it and replace it. The only thing you need to make sure about is that the replacement looks the same and has the same length stem in the middle. So here's the replacement, and as you can see, it's extremely pliable, unlike the original one. Also, the stem in the middle is the longer style, just like the original one as well. But before we can replace the diaphragm, I need to make sure that the fuel will flow through the round internal screen. The easiest way is to fill the screen with fuel and then press the silver rocker arm on the opposite side of the carburetor. The fuel on the screen should then disappear. Unfortunately, the fuel isn't flowing through the screen, so now we need to remove the needle and the rocker arm assembly to clean the screen and the needle seat. Just be very careful as the parts are very small and can literally fly away and disappear. After the parts are out, I'll then try cleaning the screen with carburetor cleaner. If you don't want to go through this trouble, I wouldn't blame you if you just ordered a brand new carburetor instead. After cleaning the needle passage and the screen, you can see that the carburetor cleaner is passing through the screen instead of filling up the pocket like the fuel was doing, so I think we fixed the flow problem. Now gently clean the needle and then put the spring, needle, and rocker arm assembly back together, and we'll try the test out one more time. So the fuel finally disappeared, so that means I can put the pumping side of the carburetor back together, then replace the metering diaphragm. Now another reason why this trimmer might not be starting is that the spark arrestor screen on your muffler might be covered in carbon. This would literally stop the airflow through the engine and keep it from starting. The fix for this would be to remove the screen and clean the carbon off and replace it. So the fuel line on top of the carburetor goes through the plastic housing, then back to the primer bulb. It then goes to the fuel tank as the return line. That means that the line that goes to the bottom of the carburetor will go through the plastic housing and straight to the fuel tank. That's where the fuel filter will connect to. I had to look at another trimmer to find that out, but you should be able to find a diagram online if you don't have a parts trimmer to look at. Now the primer bulb still works, but it's really hard to press, so it's only a matter of time before it cracks. So as a precaution, I'll replace it. These are not very expensive online or at your local small engine dealers. So here's the new primer bulb, and if you look at the back of it, you can see that the two ports are not the same length. The longer port will go to the fuel tank, while the shorter one goes to the carburetor. Now the fuel line I'll be using is yellow Tygon line that can be bought online for a few dollars. The size I'll be using is about 3/16 of an inch, and it's about 24 inches long. The first line I'll make is for the primer bulb to the top of the carburetor. I'll be connecting it to the shorter port on the primer bulb. I'll then cut the line to about where the top of the carburetor will be and then connect it. After that, I'll reconnect the throttle cable to the carburetor. Next, I'll run the fuel line from the bottom of the carburetor to the fuel tank. Running the fuel lines to the tank is the most difficult part in this entire repair. The problem is that part of the stem on the filter is supposed to stick out of the tank, and a plastic washer is used to keep the filter from coming loose. If you take a look inside the tank, you'll see how the filter is supposed to sit inside it. I'll get it out and clean it, but when I was reinstalling it, the stem broke, so I had to use a different fuel filter. Before you push the fuel line into the tank, remember to put that plastic washer on. Then you can cut the fuel line at an angle to help get it into the tank. Then pull the line out of the tank so you can cut the angle piece off and install the new fuel filter. Then you'll pull the line out at the bottom so you can push the filter into place. Then I can cut the fuel line to length and make the return line that goes to the tank and connects to the longer port on the primer bulb. Now when you install the return line into the tank, I normally push about an inch of line into the tank, but you can push as much or as little as you want, just so long as the line isn't going to fall out of the tank. After all the lines are ran, I'll put some fuel in the tank and try testing the fuel system. After pressing the primer bulb, we can see the fuel flow from the tank to the bottom of the carburetor, out of the top of the carburetor, then to the primer bulb, and finally out of the primer bulb back to the fuel tank. So the fuel is flowing exactly the way it's supposed to. That means we can try starting it now. Since it didn't start after pulling the rope a couple of times, the engine's probably flooded. I'll try starting this time without the choke. So the throttle doesn't seem to be working, and after taking a look around, it looks like the throttle cable got disconnected. I'll just reconnect it and then try starting it again. So it started and ran, but it's not getting close to full speed. Now to try and solve the problem, I want to try adjusting the carburetor's fuel adjustment screw. This particular carburetor has one screw and you'll need a special tool to turn it. In this case, the tool I need is the single D, but yours might not be the same. You can buy these online for just a few dollars as a kit. So initially I tried turning it clockwise to reduce the fuel flow and it killed the engine. As it was dying, I tried saving it by turning it back, but I wasn't able to catch it. This time I'll try turning it counterclockwise. So what I did was I turned the screw counterclockwise to find when the engine was running the fastest, but I was never able to find it. However, I did find the point when it started to slow down slightly, which is where I normally tune my engines to. I do not tune the engine to run at max engine speed. I turn the fuel adjustment so it runs slightly rich, which is usually just a quarter turn past the max engine speed. Now I do have a theory. I think the trimmer head is putting a tremendous load on the engine because of the number of strings and the diameter. I think it'd be better if it had half as many lines and possibly thinner string, but to test this theory out, I'm going to cut two of the string ends off and see if there's a change in the engine speed. So there was a definite increase in engine speed just getting rid of half the string ends. This engine has enough power to use this size line, but I think 2 ends would be less stressful than the 4 ends that it has. If I want to keep the 4 ends, I'll probably use slightly thinner line. I might follow up this video with one where I remove the add-on trimmer head and just try using the original bump feed trimmer head and see if it makes any difference in tuning the carburetor. So my question is, would you buy a Bolin's string trimmer? Now they still sell these at large hardware stores, but they look more conventional now with the fuel tank on the bottom. Personally, I don't have a problem using one, but it's not on my list. I'd rather pay twice as much for an Echo or a Stihl. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.